Who are you when the life you've built suddenly disappears? The thought clawed at Nina's mind like a restless whisper in the dark. 35 years of marriage, of shared meals, quiet routines, and predictable mornings had vanished with one decision. One moment she was a wife, a partner, a constant in someone's life. The next, she was an afterthought in the story she thought she was co-writing. Isaiah had filed for divorce, just like that. No explosive fights, no dramatic betrayals, only a quiet, indifferent conclusion. Gray divorce. That's what they called it. The unraveling of long-term marriages, when love fades into something unrecognizable. It was happening to couples everywhere, but she never thought it would happen to her. She and Isaiah had been friends. They had built a life together. She had been sure that counted for something. But here she was, 58, alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too filled with echoes of a past that no longer existed. How do you start over when your entire identity has been shaped by someone else? The silence offered no answers, only an unsettling truth. Nina would have to find them herself. There was no handbook for this stage of life. No neatly packaged guide on how to navigate gray divorce, how to unlearn decades of partnership, how to exist in the world as just Nina instead of Nina and Isaiah. She had no children to distract her from the ache of loss, no family bustling around her to fill the void. It was just her. And so, with unsteady hands, she did the only thing she could. She moved forward. The house that once felt like home now felt like a mausoleum of memories. She couldn't stay. The walls, the furniture, the worn-out coffee mugs, they all carried too much weight. So she packed up her life into boxes, rented a modest apartment, and stepped into the unknown. The first night alone was the hardest. The absence of Isaiah was deafening, a hollow space where companionship used to be. She reached for her phone more times than she cared to admit, instinctively wanting to share something with him, a thought, a joke, a meaningless observation. But there was no one on the other end anymore. She had to learn to make her own choices, what to eat, how to spend her evenings, whether to get a cat or not. Decisions that once felt small now carried the weight of her independence. Nina was grieving, yes, but grief wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something else, something unfamiliar, something hers. The mornings were the hardest. For years, Nina had woken up to the sounds of another person, the rustling of sheets, the quiet shuffle of slippers against the floor, the soft clink of a coffee mug being placed on the kitchen counter. Now there was only silence, a silence so vast it felt like it might swallow her whole, but she refused to let it. At first, she filled the void with noise, the television humming in the background, the radio playing songs she pretended not to associate with Isaiah. Anything to keep the silence from reminding her of what she had lost. But distraction wasn't healing. It was avoidance. So one morning, she did something different. She sat with the quiet. She let the emptiness settle around her without trying to chase it away. It was uncomfortable, unfamiliar. But there, in the stillness, something unexpected stirred, a sense of possibility. She could do whatever she wanted with this day. That thought was both liberating and terrifying. For years, her choices had been intertwined with Isaiah's, where they vacationed, what they ate for dinner, how they spent their weekends. She had gotten used to considering someone else before herself. But now she was learning to make decisions just for her. The first one was simple. She brewed a cup of coffee, not the dark roast Isaiah had always preferred, but a smooth, vanilla blend she had once loved, but stopped buying because he didn't like it. The first sip tasted like something she had long forgotten, herself. Each day she reclaimed a little more. She rearranged her furniture, not for efficiency but for comfort. She filled her fridge with foods that made her happy. She took long walks without checking in with anyone. The world had not ended with her marriage. She was still here. And she was beginning to see that she could stand on her own. But healing wasn't linear. Some days she felt strong, capable, independent, almost excited about this strange new episode. Other days, the grief crashed over her like a wave, sudden and unforgiving. She hadn't expected to run into Isaiah so soon. It happened at the grocery store, a place she once associated with routine shopping lists and shared decisions about which brand of coffee to buy. She had turned a corner, and there he was, casually picking out a bottle of wine. Not their wine, his wine. For a second, time bent in on itself. She wanted to reach for his arm, tell him about her day, slip back into the ease of familiarity. But then she remembered. They weren't that anymore. He looked up, startled. Their eyes met, and there it was, the weight of a history, too deep to be erased, but too fractured to be repaired. "Hey, Nina." His voice was hesitant, uncertain. She swallowed against the lump in her throat. "Hey." It wasn't an argument. There was no bitterness, no raised voices, just a quiet acknowledgement of what once was and what no longer could be. As she walked away, she felt the sting of it, the undeniable proof that life had moved on, with or without her. That night, she sat on her couch, letting herself feel the sadness. She didn't run from it, didn't drown it in distractions. Instead, she honored it, because grief, she was learning, wasn't a sign of weakness. It was proof that what she had lost had mattered. Loneliness was an uninvited guest, lingering in the quiet corners of her new life. It wasn't just about missing Isaiah. It was deeper than that. Like she had been uprooted from the life she knew and planted in unfamiliar soil, unsure if she would ever bloom again. There were moments when the emptiness felt unbearable. Nights when she longed for someone to ask about her day. Mornings when she wished she had a hand to reach for across the bed. The silence, once a companion she was learning to embrace, sometimes turned on her, whispering reminders of all she had lost. But loneliness, she discovered, wasn't just absence. It was space. And space could be filled. She started saying yes more often, to coffee invitations, to long phone calls with old friends, to yoga classes she once dismissed as frivolous. She found comfort in small conversations with strangers, the woman at the bakery who always remembered her order, the neighbor who offered her fresh tomatoes from his garden. Connection didn't have to look the way it once did. She was learning that life after gray divorce wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about discovering what was waiting to be found. The absence of love does not mean the absence of life. It means the presence of possibility. The first time she met Dominic, she wasn't looking for anything. She had gone to an art exhibit alone, a bold choice, considering she had never been one to do things by herself. But something inside her wanted to try. She had been admiring a painting, soft hues of blue swirling into deep shades of gray, when a voice beside her said, "It looks like the ocean before a storm." She turned to find a man, around her age, wearing a kind smile. His hair was graying at the temples, his posture relaxed, as if he carried no urgency with him. She smiled politely. "Or maybe after," he chuckled. Optimistic. She wasn't sure if she was, but the conversation flowed easily, like the tide of a calm sea. They talked about the painting, then about books, then about nothing in particular. It wasn't flirtatious, wasn't filled with unspoken expectations. It was just nice. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as someone's ex-wife, not as a woman navigating gray divorce, but as just Nina. They parted ways with nothing more than a nod and a lingering glance, but something had shifted inside her. Maybe love, in all its forms, wasn't behind her. Maybe it wasn't something she had lost, but something that could be redefined. Love doesn't end with divorce. Sometimes it simply changes shape. Could happiness exist after gray divorce? For a long time, Nina wasn't sure. The loss of her marriage had felt like the loss of herself, like she had been dismantled, piece by piece, and left with fragments she didn't know how to put back together. She had spent 35 years as someone's wife, and when that title was stripped away, she had no idea who she was without it. The hardest part wasn't just the loneliness, it was the uncertainty. The terrifying realization that she had never truly been on her own before. Isaiah had always been there, woven into the fabric of her life, and when he left, it was like someone had pulled at a single thread, unraveling everything. But slowly, imperfectly, she had learned how to weave a new pattern. She had learned to appreciate solitude, not as loneliness, but as freedom. She could sit in her apartment with a cup of tea, the quiet wrapping around her like a soft embrace, and feel at peace. She could choose what to do with her time, no compromises, no negotiations, just her own desires guiding her way. She had discovered that love wasn't confined to marriage. It was in the friendships she nurtured, in the family she reconnected with, in the kindness of strangers who became familiar faces. Love was in the little things, the warmth of sunlight filtering through her window in the morning, the comfort of a book that felt like an old friend, the joy of a deep, meaningful conversation over coffee. And perhaps, love was in the man who had admired the same painting she had. But the difference was this: she wasn't searching for someone to complete her. She wasn't looking to fill a void or silence the echoes of her past. She had found peace within herself first. Gray divorce had forced her to start over, but it had also given her something precious: a second chance. A chance to live for herself, to make choices without the weight of anyone else's expectations, to rediscover passions she had set aside for too long. She traveled, not far, not extravagantly, but enough to remind herself that the world was bigger than her grief. She took weekend trips to places she had never been, ate meals alone in restaurants without feeling self-conscious, and walked through new cities without a destination in mind. She danced in her living room to music she loved. She learned how to cook meals for one and enjoyed them without sadness. She adopted a cat, a quiet companion who reminded her that life, even in its simplest moments, was worth savoring. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had once feared that life after Gray divorce would feel like an ending. Now, she knew it was only the beginning. And as she stood by her window one evening, watching the city hum with life, she smiled to herself. She had made it, not just through the pain but beyond it. Sometimes, the best chapters of our lives are the ones we never expected to write.